Hello and welcome to Shannon Gardens. Thank you guys so much for joining me. So this week's video actually is turning out quite different than what I initially intended. I had an idea all set for what I was going to do this week and wanted to show you guys how my garden was looking and some ideas that I had. And then I visited my local gardening centers again this week and saw that they actually have fall vegetables out. And in some cases, they were actually unloading them as I was there. Now, this is a little earlier than I would normally plant, but I was so excited to see them because the last couple of years, I've really struggled to find some good looking fall vegetables. So I really am so excited because I was able to find everything that I normally like to plant in the fall, with the exception of sage, but that's okay because I still have sage from the summer and it may pull through. So I'm not really that concerned with that. But everything else I've found, and I want to share with you guys what I'm planting and go ahead and get those planted in my elevated planters. Now, in addition to that, I hope to be updating a couple of my containers. Nothing major. That will be really in the next couple of weeks where I'm really doing a big fall update. But as of right now, I just want to update a couple of containers and do a little bit of a refresh on plants that don't look so great now, and we'll start to bring in that fall color. So I hope to get to that today as well. We'll see how it goes, and just anything else random that I notice around the garden or I think to share with you guys as well. All right, so I think that's it. I'm really excited to share these fall vegetables with you, so let's get to it. All right, you guys, so I wanted to share with you what I am planting. Now, again, I am planting in elevated planters, and so I'm using an appropriate soil for those planters. You want to make sure that you're using more of an elevated planter mix, which is going to have a lighter, more well-draining mix and is going to be lighter for this particular planter. Now, if I were to use garden soil or something like that, it would just be too heavy for these planters. So you want to make sure that you're using the appropriate soil for your container, or if you're planting in ground. And so I've made sure to pick that up at my local nursery. So I've got that ready. Now I already have existing in there, and I'll show you guys in a moment, some herbs that I planted in spring. And for the most part, they're looking pretty good. I would say the only one that's maybe a little iffy is the sage. And if I see one in the next few weeks when I'm out and about, which I imagine I will, then I'll just go ahead and pick another one up just to make sure that I have enough for fall and winter. The one that I have may do well and may come back, so I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to pull it, but it's just not looking its best. So we'll see how it plays out, and I'll show that to you guys in a moment. But I did want to point out that because my herbs are looking good and I want to carry those in as long as they'll last through winter, and I think that for the most part they will, I am going to leave them in the planter and just plant around it. So with that in mind, I'm not replacing all my soil in my elevated planters. This is relatively new soil, and there was no disease, there were no pests, it just had herbs in it. And I think that I can just dig some of that out and till it up a bit and put some new soil in there and put my fertilizer and everything should be just fine for these plants. Now, I did want to point out the fertilizer that I am using, and this by no means doesn't mean that you have to use this fertilizer. It's just what I prefer. And so that's the Dr. Earth, and I'm using their vegetable and herb fertilizer. And it actually does have instructions on the back here, depending on what kind of vegetable you're planting, as far as how much fertilizer to add. So I'm just going to follow the instructions and I should be good to go. So with that, let's take a look at the vegetables I am planting, and we'll start here with collards. I am very excited. My family loves collard greens. I love collard greens. And this is probably going to last, out of all my vegetables that I plant, this is going to last the longest. It's got a nice thicker leaf, and it just isn't as reactive to the elements as maybe some of the other plants that I'm planting today. So definitely planting collard greens. I plant them every year, and I'm super excited about that. Next, I've got pak choi, and I just started planting this probably a year or two ago, and it's done really well. I love adding it to stir fry. So I got a couple of different plants of pak choi that I'll be adding to the garden. And then I also have Swiss chard here. So hopefully you guys can see that. Again, that's something that I plant every year in my fall vegetable garden, and I'm very excited that I found that. I do not think that I found Swiss chard last year, so I was super excited when I ran across it. I was probably too excited and looked really nerdy when I actually saw these in the store, but nonetheless, I was very excited. So moving on, we have a casualty. Maybe I should eat that now. Um, we have romaine lettuce. So the romaine lettuce is great. I love having it in my garden. And this is going to last longer than another lettuce that I'm planting. It's got a bit of a thicker leaf. So kind of like when I was describing the collards, as far as having that thicker leaf, it just lasts a little bit longer and is more tolerant of different weather. And I found that with the romaine too. Whereas compared to our next lettuce, this one's a little more sensitive. This is the bib lettuce or butter crunch, which is actually my favorite kind to eat, but it does tend to be a little bit more tender. I'll show you guys. This is a thinner leaf. You can probably see or maybe see how I'm holding it, but this is a thinner leaf and it is a bit more reactive, especially if we have hot weather, which we do. I'm in Georgia in zone 7B, 8A, and we can have cooler temperatures and then all of a sudden have some really hot summer-like temperatures. And that's probably the one I'm most concerned with planning today. Is I know that we're going to have some hot temperatures that come back, and I'm a little concerned about that one, but I'm just going to see how it goes. And I may even use a traveling umbrella. I've got one in the backyard here, and I may actually use that to help shield the garden on those hotter days until it gets a little cooler. Now, lastly, while this isn't a vegetable, it's an herb, but I do have my cilantro here, and I got a couple of containers of cilantro. Now, I've found personally that cilantro does way better for me in the fall than the spring. And again, I think it's just where I am. I don't know. You guys can comment and let me know if you guys are in the Southeast and you have better luck in the springtime with cilantro than I do. It'll do well at the beginning, but it just gets so hot so quickly here. It just tends to kind of die out. So I just don't have the best of luck in the springtime with cilantro. But fall is a different story. I've had cilantro last well into our more moderate winters, and it does really, really well. So I actually prefer to plant cilantro in the fall. So I've got a couple of containers of the cilantro, and that's pretty much it. Now, again, because I already have existing herbs in my elevated containers, I'm really just removing some of that soil, and I'll be putting some new soil in and kind of tilling it around and mixing it up, putting in my fertilizer, and then planting my vegetables. And I think that the thing I really love about elevated planters is their ease. I'm not bending over, planting in ground. It's very easy to get to them. They're actually right outside my kitchen, so I can just run out there. And I find that when I have my vegetables right outside my house, I just tend to keep a better eye on them. When I had them in ground planted kind of farther from the house, I just wouldn't visit them like I thought I would, and I wouldn't notice if I had pests until too late and things like that. So for me, it just works out better and it's easier to deal with having them in the elevated planters, or like I did in the springtime where I planted in planting bags. So either way, I just found that that works out best for me. It may be something where I plant in ground in the future again, but for right now, container gardening's where it's at for me, at least with my vegetables anyway. All right, so I believe that's it. Now, you guys may have noticed that I have some mums back here, and a lot of them are just buds. They aren't opening up. I do intend, if I have time today, to replace some of the plants that aren't looking so good in a couple of containers. Now, I will be doing a big refresh in my containers here, probably in October as we go into the fall and winter season and I prepare for the holidays. So you guys make sure to stay tuned for that. But right now, my containers, for the most part, are doing really well. And there's just a couple of plants that need to be replaced, and I'm planning on replacing them with the mums and starting to add in that fall color. Okay, so hopefully I will get to that. We'll see how that goes. And I did want to mention that I did get these mums at Home Depot, but I am starting to see mums come in more and more in all the stores that I visited. And one other thing that I did want to mention is the stores that I visited, which were Lowe's, Home Depot, and Pike Nurseries. And I think Pike Nurseries is more of a Southeastern store in the Southeast US, but I did see the vegetables and actually got some of these vegetables there, but they are at Lowe's and Home Depot. I would say Lowe's had a little bit more of a selection as of right now than Home Depot, but they but they all seem to be getting them in now. So I did want to let you guys know that as well. Again, I'm in Georgia, so it may vary depending on where you're at, but it's something to definitely keep an eye out for if you're looking to plant those fall veggies. Okay, so I believe that's it. It is time for me to get to planting. So I'll take you guys over there and show you how the planters look right now and the herbs that I have in there, and then refresh that soil and add these in. Okay, so here are my elevated planters. You can see the oregano is doing really, really well. I'm going to leave that. And then I've got some marigolds that aren't doing so well. My thyme, here's one sage. I actually have one that's doing a little bit better than that. And some parsley. The basil's pretty much done. I hadn't let that go to flower for quite some time, but then just kind of let it go over the last couple of weeks. So it's just about spent, but I've used quite a bit of it. There's the other sage, which looks pretty good. I wouldn't say it looks the best, but it looks pretty good. So I'll leave that. Some more oregano. I have a mystery plant here. I think that might be a weed. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it looks like it's about to flower. So I will go ahead and pull that. Beyond the weed, we've got a little bit of lemon verbena, and then we've got another kind of sad looking marigold. So I'll just pull whatever isn't working out in these planters and then refresh the soil, like I mentioned, add some fertilizer and pop in my new vegetables, and that will be it. Now, one thing that I may end up doing is going around the perimeter of these elevated planters and putting some bird netting just to act as a little bit of fencing to keep the squirrels out. So I may end up doing that. We'll just see how it goes. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, that I do actually have covers for these elevated planters as well. So once the temperatures get really low, I can put covers on there and you can unzip them and let the airflow come in. And on sunnier days, and then cover them again when it gets cold, particularly at night. And that just helps for everything to last a bit longer. I'd really just started using those the last couple of years. Before, I would just leave them be and not cover them. But I do have those covers, as well as having freeze cloths and freeze jackets, which I got last year for plants in general. So that's just something kind of to keep in mind. That you guys may want to look into as far as covering your vegetables to help them last a little bit longer during the winter time. Okay, so I've kind of cleaned it out, and I'm just going to use this little handheld cultivator just to kind of break everything up, although really it's so easy to work. This is why I love using these elevated containers or planters, because it's just so much easier than the Georgia red clay that we have here. So I'm just going to kind of break everything up, add in my new soil, mix in the fertilizer, and then stick the plants in, and that's that. Now, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but I'll probably add some pansies as we get more into October, just to add some color over here. I am going to leave this oregano too, even though I've got a big one over there, but this one looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave that. But I think I'm good to go. The parsley will definitely last through the winter. I haven't had any problems with that, and usually sage does too. I do need to pull this one basil that I've left, but I probably will go ahead and just pull off the remaining leaves just so I can use those in recipes. But these are pretty much done, so I don't think that there's really any use to leave them at this point. So I'm just gonna pull this out, and that's that. All right, you guys, so I am done. I've got my romaine planted here for the most part. All my romaine is in this first one. I have a couple of the Swiss chards and then the cilantro. Now, the cool thing about romaine is that it does grow more narrow, so you're actually able to fit more around it than, let's say, the Bibb lettuce like we have here. That really grows a lot wider, and that is something really neat about the romaine, is that you can fit more into an area because they do have more of that narrow growth habit. But I've got all that planted here. I think that should do quite well. And then back here, I have my collards, more Swiss chard, the pak choi. I know everything's leaning over, so it's a little hard to tell what's what. And then the Bibb lettuce beside my monster oregano. So I'm done here. I'm just going to water everything. I actually did go ahead and put up a little bit of netting just to help protect from the squirrels. And honestly, it is just very rudimentary. It's just here to help protect my vegetables. And I just use some bamboo sticks and bird netting. And this bird netting is very similar to the deer netting that I installed around my perennial garden a few weeks ago. And I use the term installed loosely because it is certainly not professional, but it does the job. So it's going to help keep those squirrels out and keep them from eating the vegetables. And I think that I'm pretty good to go. And so I just did it around the perimeter here. You can barely see it, to be honest with you, which is good. So it's not really that much of an eyesore, and it does help protect these plants. So that was relatively easy. I will say that the netting can be a little tricky to deal with just because it can get easily tangled up, but otherwise it's pretty easy to deal with. And I don't have any netting over the vegetables themselves, so butterflies or whatever come in here aren't going to get trapped in this netting, and they'll just be able to fly right out, and I'll be able to harvest my vegetables very easily. So I think that that's it for the elevated containers for now. One other thing that I did want to mention that I didn't mention earlier is that there are a couple of herbs that I have outside of the elevated containers that I showed you guys that I'm planting in today. And that's my rosemary. I actually have two separate containers of rosemary, and this is one of them, as well as mint, which is just starting to kind of fade out. But the rosemary gets so big that I have it in its own container. And then the mint, if you guys have ever grown mint, then you know it sends off these runners that just overtake everything. So I like to keep it contained in its own little container and have it grow a little bit smaller and more manageable. And that way it's not taking over any other herbs or anything that I have in a larger container. All right, so I'm moving on to my containers where I'm just placing in those new mums. And these are annual mums that I purchased. Now, everything looks pretty good here. You can see the salvia is looking fantastic, and the euphorbia, lantana, and the geraniums. And then the marigolds are still blooming, but they do have a lot of dead space over here. You can see they just don't look so good on the ends. They look a little crunchy. And so that's what I'm going to pull in two containers and just replace them with the mums. It'll add some fall color and spruce up the containers just a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, I am going to be refreshing my containers as we move into the cooler weather. But for right now, I just need to refresh a couple of areas because most of my containers, for the most part, I feel like I should knock on wood here, actually look really good and are really happy. So I'll just get to work and I'll show y'all the end result. I just replaced those marigolds, and that's going to look really, really nice. I mean, I don't know if you guys can tell, hopefully you can, but it makes such a big difference just moving that one plant out and adding a plant in here. And I did specifically choose mums that had a lot of buds. They did have more that were flowering and had lots of flowers already open, but I wanted ones that had more buds so they would open and not already have their first flush of flowers done. So I've added that, and I think that'll look really, really nice. I've got this container here. We have our second container here, and you can see the mums right there. And again, this just looks so much nicer when we have the one plant replaced. And it just goes to show that, you know, if you just have one plant that's not doing well, it's pretty easy to take it out of a container and replace it, and everything kind of looks revitalized. So those will be opening here in the next week, I would imagine, or even the next few days to a week. And it'll bring a little bit of fall to my containers before I do my big container replant for fall and winter. And I did mean to show you, so I did get those mums at Home Depot, and here's the little sticker for it. And it's just a regular garden mom, and they were $7.98. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you guys the tag too. They had lots of different colors. Again, some were more in bloom than others, but they had a lot that had unopened buds on them. And the same thing for Lowe's when I went there the other day. Lots of garden mums coming into stock and with lots of buds. So you guys could be on the lookout for that as well. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm so excited to get the fall vegetables already planted, and the fact that I was able to find them, and really couldn't wait to share that information with you, especially if you struggled with finding fall vegetables like I have the last couple of years. So thank you for joining me again. Now please make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you can be notified each time I upload a new video. All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful week, and until next time, happy gardening and goodbye.